Well, we're back for another episode of the Growth Game podcast. We're appreciating the fact that we have an excellent guest this morning, Barry Asin from the Staffing Industry Analysts. Barry and I have known each other for a number of years. Barry was happy to be able to join, and we very much appreciate it. So, Barry, thank you very much for having time to come on and speak with us today.
I'm happy to be here, Paul, and thanks again for the invitation.
Excellent. Well, very good. So, first of all, I just want to start with a big thank you. I've been in the industry, the staffing industry, for many years. As you may remember from some of our past conversations, I started out in the staffing business, came from a long line of staffing professionals in my family. And then in the 90s, I decided to sell my specialty staffing company. I went into the finance business. And so I've spent an entire career now of financing almost 800 staffing companies. And I absolutely love what I do every day. But one thing I really want to say thank you for is, the SIA has had a pivotal role in staffing for about 3 decades now, and we just appreciate it. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate what the company does for the industry, and so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We love what we do, and I think the industry it's been a great place to be, and it's got a great mission. We like helping folks in the industry look around the corner a little bit and see what's coming next.
And you do an amazing job with that. So I very much appreciate it. So, tell us a little bit about what you do. How do you impact staffing company owners? And, how do you provide the data? How do you research the data? And I know you have such a big impact, but a lot of times looking in, staffing company owners don't really know how you do what you do.
The company SIA has grown with the industry over time. When I first joined, there were about 15 of us. We've got over 60 people right now. We've even got a team of people around the world. We've got an office in Mountain View, California, as well as over in London. And since the pandemic, we've got people everywhere. We've really embraced this virtual world. But yeah, a lot of what we're doing is mostly just talking to staffing firms, talking to the buyers as well. And we do a lot of survey work so that, we like to keep things, obviously we've got opinions about what's going on, but we really like to have data. I think that, having a real sort of data-based look at what reality is. And I think that's a key thing for a leader of a staffing business. It's like not the world as you'd like it to be, but like really understand what's going on actually out there. So we spend a lot of time talking to CEOs and executives at staffing businesses, at the clients, the HR and procurement people. We have a whole side of our business that serves the Fortune 500, the enterprise buyers, and so it's interesting to get their perspective, and it helps us help the staffing firms because we're actually able to have a sense of what the buyers are looking for. And so, we do a lot of that, like I said, through surveys, research, interviews, and the like. The other thing is that for us, a huge part of our business is conferences and events. And there's nothing like getting 1,000 staffing executives all together in one place and just listening to them about what's going on and what their challenges are, what their passions are. We're about to do that. We've got coming up in Las Vegas at the end of March, our executive forum. And it's just a great way to make it real. So it's like combine the data with the people is sort of what we enjoy doing and really, tell the stories of all the success in the industry.
Yeah, I love that. I've always appreciated that you are a data-driven organization. And not only are you so focused on the data, but I really appreciate how you propagate that information so that clients of ours have something to shoot for. I appreciate very much how, you really talk a lot about what's happening with the enterprise values, what's happening with growth, what do buyers really want? Because it allows the staffing startup, which, we finance high growth startups all the way to, some of our largest success stories have been companies that have reached 300-400 million a year in sales. But throughout their entire entrepreneurial journey, I appreciate how you've been able to give them, not only some guardrails, but a goal, something to shoot for, something to really create wealth for themselves. And it's not like it's just a big secret of what really it's going to take to be able to create their own family wealth and be able to get to something that a buyer would enjoy. So something I've always really appreciated about what you do,
Yeah.
and so that's great, very very good.
It's funny you mentioned that, Paul. The most among our members, the most read report we have is our ranking of the largest staffing firms, the $100 million club, and
Right.
we have like the most comprehensive. It's sort of the market share report on the industry essentially, and firms share their annual revenue with us, and we publish this report that ranks the largest firm. That's the thing that everybody wants to get on that list. And for the startup companies, they're like, well, what do we have to do to get there? And you got to perform, right? You got to grow a substantial business in order to make it. But there's a lot of ambition out there in the industry, and a lot of folks who really want to grow and be part of that club.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's great. It's somewhere to shoot for, and that ambition is great. We talk about it regularly to the owners that we work with. So it's interesting. Over the last couple of years, I'm curious if something has stood out to you as a shocking piece of research or a shocking piece of change of something that's happened in the industry. But I'm curious if there's anything that's really stuck out to you in the last couple of years and what you're seeing going into 2024.
Right. Well, it's, I think that in general, a lot of what we've been doing our research on that's been just fascinating has been about how technology is changing the industry. And so maybe we can get into that as we go. But, the most shocking thing that happened in the industry, right, and for businesses of all sizes has been the pandemic and the way that's changed the world. And the story that has been the most sort of example of that has been what went on in healthcare staffing, and in particular in travel nursing through the pandemic. And, typically our research shows that most people would prefer, there's a core of people who really want to work contract, temporary type work, people who are in transition or the like. But most people, the majority, prefer a full-time job. During the core of the pandemic, if you think of 2021 and 22, there were nurses out there who were leaving their full-time job at some hospital and becoming travel nurses and picking up and going around the country. And they were doubling their salary, tripling their salary.
Wow.
To become a part of the staffing industry. We saw huge growth in travel nurse staffing. The industry, it was sort of a $5-6 billion industry. I think it sort of peaked out at over 30 billion for something like that. Healthcare staffing quadrupled in volume. We track the revenue that comes to staffing firms, but now as the pandemic has eased, that's all coming back to earth. And so it's just this roller coaster ride. The healthcare staffing industry, they're very staffing firms are very mission driven, all about connecting people with work. Healthcare staffing doubly so, because it's like saving lives. That's what they're, getting folks in that position. And so it's just been this roller coaster of this huge growth in 2021 and 22, back down to earth in 23, and it's still coming down a little bit in 24. And so the industry is still significantly larger than it was pre-pandemic, but the roller coaster ride to get there has been it's been a little crazy. And I know it's been very stressful for folks in the healthcare staffing industry, and just a crazy sort of ride the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been very challenging. We have a number of clients in that space, and like you said, it was there was some really amazing times during the pandemic. I love the fact, and I agree, you highlighted it. They are so mission driven, and the reality is it wasn't just that it was really great times economically for them and their businesses were thriving, but they really realized that they were saving lives, and that repositioning of staff across the country was literally critical to hospitals to save people's lives during the pandemic. So not only did they win financially, but they won from the standpoint that they were doing the right thing and getting people in the right place to be able to save lives. But it was brutal when it came back down, because then it really did affect their
It's been a lot.
profitability.
It's been really hard to manage through all that. And I
Yeah,
mean, you can remember in early 2020 in New York what was going on, and
yeah,
I think we've all sort of blocked it out. But it's like we need, 1,000 nurses to,
yeah.
to pick up and move themselves across the country at, on very short notice. So there's a lot of amazing stories there. So I think that one will stick with me for forever.
That was a shocking trend. I mean, that was an immediate, huge shock, and it really changed a lot of what the staffing owners had to deal with in healthcare staffing. Here's what I'm seeing. I'm curious if you've been seeing this, but I've been seeing a lot of the more, and you mentioned technology, some of the healthcare firms that really are technology first have really been pushing their, even though some of their businesses dropped down 25, 30% of what they were during the pandemic, and they had to deal with that from an overhead and operation perspective. Some of the ones that have started to really pick up during 2024 are really technology focused. So they're providing easier tools to the buyers, to the hospitals, so that they can find and attract talent and keep talent. And I've started to see some of those clients that are really pushing technology as a tool to increase productivity are starting to see a real pickup over the last 3 months or so. There's been some really interesting things. If they've just been stuck doing what they've always done, which is more manual processing of servicing. Do I find the right nurse? Do I get them out? I've seen those companies go flatline or even decline in sales. But do you believe that that's a big part of the
Yeah, I
return to
mean,
growth?
absolutely. The what we have been living through, and this was pre-pandemic, was what we talk about as like a digital transformation and disruption of traditional staffing models. And so, if you look back of the history of the industry, sort of, I can remember back to when first PCs came in and sort of, got out of paper business into sort of online. And then, the growth of job boards and VMS was a huge disruption, VMS and MSP. And then, move toward a more platform model, the sort of recruiterless, app-based, letting candidates and clients make that more direct connection. That all has been going on. The pandemic lit that on fire. And, the technology, all of this technology is, ultimately makes the recruiters and the staffing firms more productive if you implement it properly. That's what it should be doing. So they're able to manage a bigger desk. And for some of the staffing firms that are playing in that business, they've really become more sort of technology first and, are on the border. And this is where the industry has gotten very interesting in the last few years. There are a lot of tech disruptors out there who don't really know the core staffing business, but have come into it seeing, hey, there's a lot of sort of tech first approaches to this, particularly, attractive to younger workers who, I think about my kids who, they would rather die almost than pick up the phone and call someone. Why would I do that? They'd much rather do it on their own on an app. And I
My
think
kids don't call me; they only text me and
yeah,
WhatsApp
well,
me. I totally agree.
that's exactly it. Why would they call you?
Yeah.
All of that sort of tech first transition, I think, is where the industry is going. I mean, we've been, if you think about companies like Uber and Lyft and these sort of platform disruptions that happened to the traditional taxi industry, that hasn't really happened in staffing for a whole variety of reasons. But it's coming we see more of a convergence between these tech first models and the people first models. And I do think the staffing firms that are outperforming are the ones who are figuring out how to blend the technology with the people in the traditional business. And we do see that they outperform because they can fill orders faster, because they're providing a better experience to their candidates. That, part of what happened in the travel nurse business was they needed to connect so fast with fill these huge orders. Recruiters could not keep up. So allowing the candidates and the clients to do more of that matching themselves with, the people more in the background, that was that really accelerated that transition. It's just hard for people to change. And that like made it a matter of, not much choice in the change. And that's part of why we've seen this sort of platform tech first model has really picked up in healthcare staffing more than elsewhere in the staffing industry. So that really
I
is one of
agree.
the big transformations going on.
I agree, and I love it. And I love to see the transformation. You're right. I love that you said it's a convergence because it's truly you have to have a tech forward strategy without losing what this business is, which is that people first business.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. This is all about people. It's about connections, and it's that human element. And how do you really converge those two things with using technology? And I agree with you. Those are the companies that
Yeah.
will win.
I think a lot of the tech disruptors that received a lot of venture capital money came
Yeah,
into this and they sort of missed that human thing. And they
I
thought,
agree.
if you build it, they will come. That
Right.
doesn't necessarily, people still
Doesn't
need to
work.
be sold and they need a
Yeah.
human being out there. So I
Which I
think
love it.
there's a blend.
That's a huge opportunity for the staffing entrepreneurs that adopt the technology without losing the fact that this
I
business is
think
about
that is the
human
way forward.
capital. I agree
Yeah.
with that so much. So, you do a lot of macro research and, without being, asking you to tell us, through your crystal ball where the economy is going,
Oh
which is
yeah.
probably too much of a stretch. I'm curious if you have any with your research and the data that you're seeing, kind of what are you seeing for projections? Like, where do you see in a macro staffing environment happening here, primarily US and Canada, over the course of the next year or two? Do you have any predictions that you are based on some of the data that you've analyzed?
Well, first off, part of the prediction game, I would say, is like, you're almost guaranteed to be wrong. So, um, it's particularly in the disruptive sort of change driven world that we've got. We're actually
Mhm.
right in the forecast. We do a twice a year forecast. And so we're going to come out, actually, we'll release it at Executive Forum at the end of March, beginning of April. We'll come out with our revised forecast, and we go through and we interview and survey a whole bunch of firms out there and sort of get a sense of the trends. The last time we did this, our forecast from last fall, we felt like 23 was definitely a down year. We're adding up all the numbers right now. I think it turned out a more difficult year than we had thought. So we'll probably downgrade our estimate of how 2023 went. For 24, it's a really interesting story. Our forecast. We'll see how our forecast as of last fall was at a sort of low to mid single digit growth in 24.
Right,
We still
right.
thought there's going to be some more weakness in healthcare. The other story I could have told you, Paul, of like the most remarkable thing going on is typically if you told me what GDP was going to do, the
Yep.
US economy overall, there's a pretty clear regression line where you could forecast that, like, if GDP grows at 3%, staffing is going to probably grow somewhere like 5 to 10%, sort of thing.
Right.
That this past year, that connection has broken down. The economy has actually performed fairly well.
Yeah.
Staffing has been weak. And we do the SIA Bullhorn staffing indicator every week. We've got like data that sort of real time data. I mean, the industry is still running down, sort of in the 5 to 10% on that regard year over year, and it should be growing more given GDP growth. I think there's a whole bunch of factors that are driving that. Some of that is, unemployment is so low, there aren't people to place. The
Interesting.
job churn in the market, hires, and there's a lot of stasis, I guess. Just people sitting still, waiting to see what's going to happen. So, but it's different from anything we've ever seen before, and so it's a
That's
little
interesting.
prediction in a time like this is very tough. I do think that the long term for the industry is really quite optimistic, and I think most of that is just because when we talk to our clients, they see, the enterprise buyers, they see real value in this, and they think they're going to use more and more contingent, flexible work as they look into the future. And I think the pandemic really helped change a lot of minds around that. So we're quite bullish on the longer term.
I love that, and I appreciate you highlighted that. It's such an interesting disconnect from past years to see, this constant growth of market share for contingent staffing organizations. I appreciate you highlighted that, how growth of the staffing industry has generally outperformed GDP growth by what, almost about double, right? If you look at the kind
Yeah.
of the average, but this interesting disconnect in the last year or so. My personal opinion is there's these people, there's all these factors that have allowed people to kind of take a break or a pause while they're waiting to see what's going to happen with the overall growth. And I believe that over the course of the next 18 months to 2 years, those kind of small aberrations are going to go away and we're going to return back to that initial growth because I agree. The industry is growing. Large buyers of human capital realize this really is a better way to manage their overall workforce. And I really think that we're going to see some nice growth, very bullish about the industry over the course of the next 18 months to 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see this data, the prediction, and see if we go back to normal, the normal growth of the industry. That's what I'm telling my entrepreneurs.
If there's anything normal, is like, it doesn't seem like there is a normal anymore. But,
Yeah.
the other thing I would just say on that is that I think we'll look back on this, and I think the Fed may have just pulled off that much,
I agree.
that soft landing that was not, that everybody said couldn't be done. And so that is a rare bird, that sort of thing. And so I think that's a lot of what it's just, some of the economic news is great, some of it is bad. On average, it's sort of soft landing-ish, I guess. Is what
I agree. Well, I'm an absolute optimist, and something I always try to talk to my audience about, to the companies that we finance, is that regardless of what's happening around them, the leaders that succeed are able to succeed in any environment. And I appreciate that you wrote a great book, The Breaking Through. If I understand this correctly, Barry, really the key is how to pick the top 5 leadership disciplines that the top companies in staffing you've been able to see that have in common. I think that's brilliant because let's face it, successful entrepreneurs pattern match. Yes, they're mavericks. They do things new and interesting, but the reality is that the most successful entrepreneurs find a way to match the patterns of other successful people. So I'd love to talk about your book a little bit. I think it'd be great for our audience who are all striving to be ambitious and learn how to be great leaders. Can you talk about some of those leadership disciplines that you really saw in the most successful staffing companies?
And absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that, that I most love about the staffing industry is just the great success stories, and particularly the success stories. It's like one thing if you've got the $1 billion publicly traded company and how you get to 2 billion or something like that. But the folks that are really amazing are the ones who go from startup to 100 million and beyond. And it's a small club, so we track about 240 firms over 100 million in revenue, and there's almost 20,000 staffing firms in the U.S. The vast majority of staffing firms never grow beyond $5 million in revenue. So what's different about the companies that go from 5 million to 100 million or beyond? The short answer of it is that it's about the leadership, and we went and interviewed, and we have the data on companies that have gone on this journey. And my co-author Mike Cleland and I went out and we studied and had long conversations with the leaders and the founders of a group of about 14 firms that went on that journey, and we found 5 things in common among them. The first is commitment to growth. The vast majority of staffing firms, the reason they don't grow is they actually don't want to grow. It's either a lifestyle business, or they're not willing to make the tough decisions that would prioritize growth. Like, they might say they want to grow, but they've got their brother-in-law who's in business with them, who's head of sales, but can't sell. And unless you're willing to make a change, then you're not really committed to growing. And almost to a person, the people that have hit this 100 million mark, they had a story of one point of some very tough decisions they had to decide, like, did I want a lifestyle business, or did I want really to make the decisions that would enable us to grow? So that's one of the key disciplines, is just being committed to growing. There's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business other than you've got to, you can't just sit still in this business. Like, if you sit still, if you're not growing, you're falling behind. And so that that really is the challenge there. Commitment to growth is the first discipline. Direction is the second that they had in common, which is all about strategy.
Mhm.
Your strategy does help a lot. Like, if you picked getting into healthcare staffing back in 2018, a lot easier to grow in that than it was in office clerical staffing, for instance. And there's all sorts of strategies that can be successful. The next discipline was about culture, high performing culture. The staffing firms that have grown really have a culture by design that's focused around growth. And there's a lot to building that high performance culture. And maybe the most interesting thing is the fourth one is talent development. If you look at companies like Allegis, Insight Global, and others, these are companies that, if you talk to them, they would say they're not so much in the staffing business, they're in the leadership development
Mhm.
business. If you're a leader of a staffing firm, until you can get to the point where you can grow other leaders, you're constrained by how many hours you've got in the day. And everybody has their upper limit. It's pretty hard to get to $100 million if you're the chief salesperson, the chief recruiter. You're doing everything in that business. So growing that next generation of talent is key. And then finally, execution, which is just all about, usually where people go to first is like, well, what comp plan do I put in place? And, what is my best practice recruiting strategy? All those things are important. But if you don't do the other things, if you don't build a great culture, if you don't grow your talent, if you don't have the right strategy, great execution, it's hard to get there. It's hard to have that be sustainable, I guess would be the thing I would say.
I
So
love it.
that's
Thank you so much. That's great. I mean, I would recommend anybody that wants to break through to read your book, and I mean that's really fantastic. I love how you mentioned culture by design. There's so many times that I find that many entrepreneurs are passionate people, and so they have a kind of what their typical culture that would be would you would just immediately see it. It's something that comes natural, but there's a difference between having culture that's naturally there and actually turning it around and saying, identifying what that is and identifying what
yeah.
about their personality really resonates with people, whether that's in with clients or in their own staff, but then actually being able to say, how do I take this culture and replicate it and by design propagate it through the organization? I think
And
that's a
that,
really
that,
interesting
that,
thing.
that's a great way of saying it, Paul. And what I would say on the culture by design is, people pay way more attention to what you do than what you say.
So true.
And so, almost many of the companies that we looked at that were able to grow, they could tell you a story about, the one person who was a superstar or a high performer, but was toxic to the culture.
Right.
And at the point they realized that, like, people look at what you do. It's like who you hire, who you fire, and both for your clients and your candidates. And so, and your internal folks, what you do about the culture says a lot more about what you really value. And I think, if you say you've got, like, people first, and then you've got people who treat people horribly, and you let them sort of stay and continue to treat people horribly, then, that's not really what your culture is about. That's not really your value. Clearly it's something else. And so it's a deliberate process, I think, around culture. And then, the hardest part with culture is it's easy when the owner founder is there every day with everybody, but how do you grow that culture? And that's really where you need to build these cultural ambassadors, the people who can transmit the culture onto others, because you as the founder, you can't be there,
You
for
can't be there
everything
all the time.
if you're going to grow, not if you're going to
Right.
grow.
Yeah, I love that. That's culture ambassadors because you can't do it all. You have to be able to put the right people around. I really appreciate something you just said, super interesting, is that if you have a culture that is people first and yet you allow a toxic member of the team to remain, even if that person is the top performer from a sales point of view, I find that becomes this glass ceiling that people can't break through. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden it really kind of festers, the challenges fester. And sometimes the best thing to do is to remove one of your top performers if they are not inherently intrinsic to maintaining your culture. Sometimes you can make that change. I've seen companies do this, and then really that is their breakthrough moment where they're able to actually propagate their culture to more people, and it starts to really move out from there. But that's a difficult thing to do for companies.
I think it's really easy to to talk about it. There are people in that situation who are going, not
that's
so
right.
simple.
But how? How do I do
but that
this?
is the difference. Like
it is.
That's where it comes down to, like, what do you really want to do? Like, if
Great.
you really want to grow the business, and
well said.
Tough decisions come.
Well said. You're right when you said that there are 19, almost 19. Well, obviously you have the data, 19 or 20,000 staffing companies, and most are small, and some of them that's fine. I have lifestyle clients that just absolutely love what we do, and we continue to finance their businesses. They make good money. They have and that's fine. They don't want to grow, and that works for us. But I get charged up when I have a client that wants to grow and is passionate about growth. I have a lot of enthusiasm when it comes to growth.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like for the lifestyle businesses, I think, like, you've got to have at least enough growth to keep up with the market, right?
Absolutely.
Or to keep up with the change in the business. And so even for for a lifestyle business, you've got to have a growth mindset to stay the same. If you just, like, let it on autopilot, you're going to fall. It won't take too long to fall.
No, I like.
So you've got to have some minimum level of activity, and and the game can change. Where obviously there is disruptive change from time to time. Staffing is mostly adapted to that, and so that's always an ongoing challenge.
Definitely, obviously, the title of this podcast is The Growth Game. And you're right. The reality is, I like to say to people all the time, even if they do feel like it's a lifestyle business, I personally always say grow or die. It's that simple. Yeah. Your business will either grow or it will die. And if you're not, even if you're not ambitious and want to, achieve the $100 million revenue, you still have to look at, minimum of 10% year over year growth, in my opinion, because that creates an environment that says at least I am going to, gain the market share slightly over what the industry has been gaining and be able to stay ahead of it, right? Otherwise, a big disruptive thing can happen. They can lose a couple of clients, and all of a sudden it really hits their personal income. So you have to stay at it.
It's a great motivator for your people as well, right?
True.
Like, people want to grow, and they want to grow their career. They certainly want to grow the amount of money they make. And so you got to grow the business in order to be able to pay them more.
That's right. Absolutely. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges the staffing industry is facing going into the next year or two?
Well, there's always the cyclical challenges, right? So it's the economy goes up and goes down. The industry and demand for the industry goes up and goes down. So being smart about how you manage through the cycles. It's been a soft cycle for the industry. It's always easier when things are booming. We're all super smart when the industry is growing at 20 or 30% a year, and it's like everything is working and everyone's happy. It's harder in the in the tough times. So I think managing through the sort of tougher times, so you come out of the other end stronger, that's definitely a challenge. Getting on top of technology is, I think, increasingly critical. I think that the staffing industry has not typically been like sort of leaders in tech innovation, right? I think, but fast adopters. And so, and the tech has gotten more and more complex, building your tech stack. We're doing a lot more research these days, and actually even have added on, we have a pop-up event on our executive forum called the Staffing Tech Summit. And that's all about, like, how do you put together your tech stack? I know a lot of staffing firms struggle with, okay, like which ATS system should I have? That's decision one. But then there's all this other technology around that, from back office to engagement to platform technology, interviewing and screening and testing and all the different tech innovations that are going on, sort of sorting through all that and figuring out how to adopt it and to integrate it into your business. That's a definite challenge. We haven't yet talked about AI, but that's starting to come. I think there's mostly big opportunities to improve productivity of recruiters and salespeople and the like. I think there's a lot of
So what department
opportunity.
do you see AI impacting first in the staffing industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the internal operations, particularly around things like sourcing, recruiting, screening, matching, that whole sort of value chain there. What we're hearing use cases in the very first case are just simple things like allowing people to write emails faster and emails, marketing copy, those sorts of things. I mean, we're talking generative AI, so the sort of
Right,
chat GPT. There's all
right.
sorts of different flavors of AI that are more are important as well. So I think mostly we'll see that we will see big productivity improvements for the companies that implement this in a smart way. We've seen some really fascinating technology, AI driven, that are doing voice interviews of candidates and
Wow.
doing a pretty good job of like that first round screening interview, and it's not just like press two if you're an IT developer. It's more like, oh, you mentioned this, that, it's like the sort of thing that an average or a decent recruiter would, your best recruiters, it'll never be as good as that, but
Right.
it might bring up the average for above some of your worst recruiters.
Super interesting. Very, very interesting. I appreciate that you touched on that. Again, it goes back to that commitment to bringing technology into the business while not losing the people first, human aspect of what this business is all
Yeah,
about. So
absolutely.
I agree that it's absolutely critical. Companies large and small in the staffing industry have to have a plan. They have to have a strategy. Otherwise, again, they won't be able to continue to stay up with the industry and continue to grow to stay ahead of the competition and even be able to maintain, much less, if they have ambition, really go somewhere. So I appreciate it. We really appreciate, Barry, your coming on. We appreciate what Staffing Industry Analysts does for the entire industry. The industry is better for what you guys do. And so we very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for having the time to come on and making the time to come on today and be able to give us some of your insights. And we really appreciate it. I think anybody that wants to go to 100 needs to get out and read or reread your book and really talking about breaking through and pattern matching. It's all about pattern matching. It's something I try to talk a lot about with my clients and prospects. So thank you very much. So again, I'm Paul
Thank
DeLuca,
you, Paul.
CEO of
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. So I'm Paul
Okay,
DeLuca, CEO of Meritus Capital. It's been a pleasure being on the Growth Game podcast today. And Barry, we will continue to see each other. Look forward to seeing you at the Executive Summit here at the end of March. Thank you so much.
great. All right. Thank you, Paul.